everyone, and welcome to the Legacy Watch Roundtable on a Saturday night. I'm your host, Taryn Armstrong, and with me today is Mike. How you doing, Mike?
I'm great, Taryn, and just so we don't get things twisted, I'll put it out just to start. I'm very proud of you. You're doing a great job. You're killing it. I'm rooting for you all the way.
I was very nervous. I was like, what is he going to say when he responds to me? Is he going to say it? Is he going to say he's proud of me? Or is he going to not say it? And then I'm going to know what that means. And I'm really glad you said it, Mike. I'm feeling very good. You didn't send me positive vibes, and I'm kind of just curious, like, are you wishing me negative vibes? Like, what's going on there?
This is more of an indication that you're like a 7 out of 10 on the stock watch. Obviously the coded phrase is, I give you 1 for every 2 points or so, and positive vibes would have given you the full 10. But right now you're doing well. You're doing well, all things considered.
Okay, all right. Well, also with me today is Asia. How you doing, Asia?
Doing well, Taryn. I'm glad to be here talking about this season. But this season to me has kind of been like, if you can imagine, you go to your favorite restaurant to eat, you have leftovers, you put them in the fridge, and then you wake up the next day, you're looking forward to them, and then you realize someone ate your leftovers. So then I'm forced to eat something else I would normally eat, but it's not my favorite restaurant. So that's where I am with this season.
You had me at imagining going to a restaurant because that's something I
Else
haven't done
normally
in sincerely a long time.
Yeah. Well, I live in Texas, so everything is open.
You live in an animal? Is that what you said? What is?
My God.
How do
it's
you
like
live?
it's like a live-in restaurant.
Right.
I don't get it.
Crazy.
Well, we're here to talk about everything that's been going on this week on the Big Brother 22 live feeds, and
etc.
That stuff, the stuff that's been happening. And then we're going to get into the Legacy Watch. We're going to talk through the players and what has happened to their legacy this season. In particular, I'm curious to see where Tyler is going to fall on the Legacy Watch after a season of, I think, mostly disappointment in terms of people that were optimistic about him returning. I know that's where I'm at with Tyler and his gameplay this season, but how far might he fall? Or maybe, I don't know, maybe he made it to Final 6. That's pretty good considering his reputation. Maybe he goes up.
Yeah, it's a big accomplishment in the game of Big Brother, I've heard once upon a time.
Yeah, along with making Final 7 and Final 8. And, winning a jury vote 5-4. Nicole knows a lot about that. So we're going to get into it all tonight here on the Legacy Watch Roundtable. So this week, we saw Tyler go home, and we didn't see it, but we heard about it. Nicole has won the HOH. It was the seesaw, the seesaw kind of like with the balls. It was apparently pretty close. The Christmas came very close to winning it. Memphis was like hot on her heels, and Nicole managed to snipe it out. It's so interesting to me just how like, the feeds come back, Nicole won HOH, and now it continues to feel like it was just this inevitable stomp. But like Christmas came so close, and we didn't see it. And by the time we see it, we're going to be so used to the reality where she didn't win that it's not going to feel like it was ever close. But like, we came close. And it's happened so many times this season that the HOH could have gone a slightly different way, and it was so close. But when you look back, it just feels like, well, obviously it's been inevitable this whole time, Cody, Nicole, Enzo. But occasionally it gets close here, Asia.
Yeah, this HOH definitely was on theme with the season. If we would have had a Christmas HOH, that would have been, a huge curveball to how things are going this season. But I will say I wasn't totally disappointed that Nicole won a HOH, only because at this point I'm picking at straws, trying to enjoy certain like moments. And the only thing is that it ruins, the wise guys plan. So it's like, okay, then now we have something that, okay, it's not going perfect according to the edit because, you know, they would have loved to edit, oh, the wise guys made it to the
Mhm.
Final Four, so Memphis is set up perfectly. So I'm glad that messed up that plan. But Nicole as HOH it's a sight to see.
It really is. But I mean, I am fine with the outcome for a number of reasons. One, I totally agree with your point, Taryn. I'm someone who believes in this idea of like the multiverse. And I really would love to go into a universe one day where it was Big Brother 22, where like Janelle slides that beer stein and wins HOH number 3, where Kaser gets his ball in first and wins HOH number 4. Davon answers that question right and doesn't bequeath HOH number 5 onto Christmas. Like there have been so many close calls, and this season has been such an interesting experiment where like Robert Frost, you are met with a juncture of like, here's the thing fans want to happen and the thing fans don't want to happen. And we've gone right every single time this season. Like every single decision point has gone the complete wrong direction. It's a sight to behold. But back to the Nicole of it all, I do like this in that, you know, there's been a lot of discussion, especially the past couple of weeks, of the Nicole is a GOAT theory of it all. And I do think this, which I'm sure we'll get into, livens up at least a little bit of endgame discussion as to, could Nicole's chances be on the rise, not only as the pool of possible winner candidates is shrinking, but as she begins to, quote unquote, pad that resume? And the other one is, as much as interesting as Christmas winning might be to shake up the game, I have limits. I don't think I could ever back a Christmas Abbott HOH in my life, especially after this season. So like, even I would, yes, it might shake things up, but like, I don't need to see Christmas HOH part 2, especially in Big Brother 22 personally.
I do love this idea that like in Memphis's mind, they've made it to the Final 5. They're about to make it to the Final 4. Like in Memphis's mind, he is in the Pretty Boys, and Kira just won an HOH. But in everyone else's minds, it's like, yes! Well, everyone other than Christmas. And now I'm just waiting for like the very teary-eyed bro kind of like, oh man, we just have to do it to you, Memphis. We love you so much. It hurts us. I'm just waiting for that moment here.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting in that the chickens have kind of come home to roost for Memphis, in that he really created this alliance that really wasn't anything sincerely in the first couple of weeks in the committee, and just due to this unorthodox winning streak ended up becoming a thing. You know, remember those first couple of weeks of the season where we're like, why is Julie Chen Moonves mentioning the committee? They didn't do anything. And they end up becoming one of the most dominant alliances, coincidentally, in the show's history. Now, Memphis has this sort of cockamamie constructed alliance that I'd say 3/4 of the party are not necessarily bought into. And now he's going to get booted because he thinks he's a part of it. So clearly, like, this was a final destination thing. This was waiting to happen. And now the Grim Reaper, not to get too much into the week, is assumingly coming for him and his big scarf.
Yeah, I wonder if it's going to be a situation when he gets out the house and he sees that, you know, I don't know if Memphis is the type of guy to rewatch the season, but if he rewatches the season and he sees, wow, okay, the committee wasn't actually a thing. Well, if he watches the edit, he might think that. But if he finds out from someone who actually was watching feeds that people weren't loyal to the committee until it was like, well, it's convenient, if he's going to be like shocked, or is he still going to think, no, I created this most powerful alliance, let's play the game.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing about Memphis's strategy, where, you know, I think that at the start of the game, we looked at Memphis as like, what's this guy doing? And then it just seemed to work. And we were kind of like, okay, well, here are the hidden upsides to this strategy of like not having much of a social game, being upfront with people, having low expectations in terms of kindness, you know, like all of those things that have given him a spot in the Final 5 with, I think, a halfway decent chance to win this game. Probably the second best chance behind Cody at this point. And we've been like, wow, like look at that. Like it's, you know, he's actually done pretty well. But I think that what we're seeing right now are the downsides to this strategy that have always been there, which is that if you don't have a social game, you are relying on the competitions to carry you through, to give you the power and the credibility that you need in the house in order to stay afloat. And that's what Memphis was always going to have to rely on in the end game. He loses this HOH competition, and we just found out before this podcast started that he has also lost the veto because Nicole also beat him for the veto. And so Nicole, the person he had no concerns about beating in competitions, has now beaten him twice. And this is likely going to be the death of Memphis's game here.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Nicole in 1 week wins as many competitions as Comp Beast Christmas has really won this season, sans the safety competition, which I think we can officially squash that once and for all. If one of your wins was that someone else did something for you, like, you don't get a competition win by being Luigi in Mario Party and not doing anything. Like, that does not count on legitimacy. But yeah, it's been an interesting week. I mean, I think Danny was sort of a blindside, right, during the triple eviction. But depending on how they end up going through with this, I think this might be one of the bigger betrayals from a personal perspective, because I do not think Memphis at this moment sees it coming. Christmas at the moment we're talking about this was trying to talk to Nicole into making this big move to use the veto and put up Cody or Enzo and boot one of them, because they had this big girl power chat both separately and together earlier today. But Memphis is sitting in that cloud of comfort saying, like, I'm in both Venn diagrams of the wise guys. I'm protected triply. They're gonna keep me here when he's in for a rude awakening, if not on Thursday, beforehand, to your point, Taryn, when he inevitably gets sit down by one of those wise guys to be told it's gonna be you.
I saw a conversation earlier today where Cody and Enzo were saying they might have to go against Nicole to vote out Christmas. Did that die? Did they change their mind about that?
I mean, Enzo's always hard to read, but Enzo seems very firm in that he wants Memphis gone. And Cody, I think, would be willing to go either way, but with both of his allies wanting to go in a particular direction, meaning Memphis gone, he's willing to go along with that because it's not worth trying to push his agenda when it might be best for his game for Memphis to go anyway. Just now, when Nicole has just won the veto, Memphis was downstairs with Cody and Enzo. He was like, Christmas is losing it. She doesn't even realize that it's a done deal at this point. She's a goner. And Cody and Enzo are laughing with him. And then he runs into the storage room and Cody and Enzo give each other a look like,
okay, perfect.
He's out. He's done. Now, of course, it's only Saturday. Right. There's a lot of time until Thursday. And in that time, Cody could rethink things. Nicole could rethink things. Enzo could rethink things. All it really takes is Cody and Enzo, as you pointed out, Asia. And so if they decide they want Christmas to go because they're worried about Nicole and Christmas linking up at the Final Four, which they kind of should be, then they could make that happen. And where does Nicole have to turn at that point? She's not like she can be like, no, now I'm gonna work with Memphis. No,
right?
So they could very easily just decide to do it. Cody can always say, like, Enzo really wants to do it. Sorry. And that's basically it. Like, at worst case scenario, Cody loses Nicole being willing to take him to the final two at that point, which I'm not sure is worth it. I think he'd want to convince her to do it. So I'm inclined to believe that Memphis is in a lot of trouble here. But it does not mean that it's a done deal at this point. When you have people so firmly in power that really they can make either decision, then you will see them probably flipping back and forth a couple of times and going through the pros and cons.
I hope so, because they got to give some sort of rationale for this sluggish ass endgame schedule. I am still confused to high heaven as to why you take arguably one of the slowest stretches in the game and turn it into an entire month. Like, I mean, I guess we should be counting our blessings about this week even, because the next week, the week after, is going to just be get your taxes done, people, for next year during that time. Start up a new hobby, because the Final Four week, 7 days of the Final Four, is going to be very tough, especially if they do that final veto on Saturday. Like, it's gonna be a slug to those last few days.
What we often see in the end game, most of the time, and not always, but most of the time, what we see in the end game is it's essentially just a giant rock, paper, scissors game.
Yeah.
where like it's just about who wins the comps, and then there's like an hour of discussion max, like total, about what to do afterward, and that's basically it. And in a season like this, where the end game is pretty firmly locked up by certain people, then it's really even more just one big rock paper scissors game. And when you have the schedule that you have, it's kind of like you go, okay, rock, paper, scissors. Are going to wait 2 days.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, we'll sleep on it. We'll come back to this later.
Boom! I got a paper. Oh, you had scissors. Oh crap. Okay, well, let's one more. Now, hold on. We got to wait 3 more days to confirm that you beat me, and then another 3 days or 2 days, whatever it is, and then I'll finally leave, and then we'll play rock paper scissors again.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's a little. We don't need this much time. We need this much time in the beginning of the game because there's so much happening. At this point in the game, what are we doing?
I know.
So in retrospect, could we have, because the first week of Big Brother, due to sequester and all things, is usually like 9 to 10 days. Should the first week of BB22 have been like a non-elimination and push back Keisha's eviction 1 week? That still ends up one, dragging our feet week here at the end, but at least doesn't create a whole month where we go from 6 down to 2 by finale night.
Right. Yeah. I also could see if they had done a jury buyback. I mean, I know with COVID, that probably wasn't the best option, but the fact that there was a triple at the point that we were down to 6, it's like you do not need a month for 6 people in any version of Big Brother.
Yeah, my problem with the buyback is that, like, okay, so we go back up to 7, and it's just like another week of
this season is not the season to do a buyback in, because if there was any season to have the revolving door effect in, it's this one, where it's like you said, Taryn, things are set so concretely that like people will be rooting for, from those first 4 jurors that we saw in the jury house this past Thursday, it's like, oh, bring Davon back. Well, then you better be happy that Davon's placement got bumped up like 3 weeks, because she's going right back out the door again. Even someone like Danny could very easily go back out unless she wins a competition. So it would just, I think it'd just be a sting of like, yeah, when you think that there's an opportunity here in Big Brother 22, it ends up falling just short right in front of your face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do think Danny coming back would be fun, but only because they botched it the first time she left. Like if Danny came back, then we'd have the week that we were promised of Danny's downfall again. But if we would have had that in the first place, if they just hadn't screwed it up with a triple in the first place, and if they hadn't screwed up the first time, then and Danny came back, then it would have just been more of the same, and it would have been boring. But yeah,
that would have been so juicy. A week of Danny talking to Cody and Cody just having to lie to her. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's what we should have had in the first place. But yeah, we don't need full weeks for 6, 5, and that's what I was saying in the first place with the triple, which is that it was at the exact point in time where we often see a lot of like big moves being made, a lot of the major events happen. Dan's funeral happens in that section of time that the triple happened, along with many other like exciting events in the history of the show, and we really skipped over the one potentially good part of the season, and then really doubled down on the slow march to the end, which it's at the same time, like if you're not glued to the feeds 24/7, it's not that big of a deal. It's not like you need to be entertained at all moments, but they could definitely manage their time a lot better and get a lot more out of the season if they changed up the schedule, I think.
Well, I think especially because as of late, they've done a great job of like, we've talked so much about doing a celebrity Big Brother style scheduling where it's like, 4 day quote unquote weeks. And we get that usually in modern Big Brother with like Final Five into Final Four. Usually it's like that special Tuesday eviction show where Frankie Grande walks out to a collected studio audience. And then we have, the veto episode at the Final Four, and then we move into the Final Three. It feels a little more rushed. This is exactly the opposite of a Survivor finale, where we go from 6-2 in like 28 days, when usually it's 28 minutes to go from 6 down to 2 in Survivor. So it feels like so much whiplash. That being said, there is certainly some intrigue to be had, particularly when it comes to, and I heard Liana talk about this morning about, people sizing up their various end games. There is stuff going on, even though to be honest, it really does look like, barring some choice competition wins, it's going to be some combination of Cody, Enzo, Nicole, Final Three, most likely. There still is some intrigue as to particularly the decisions that Nicole might be making or claim that she's making to step away from that trio.
Right. And because they have so much time, they are having that opportunity to play out every scenario. So like we were saying, even with this week, they have nothing but time. So Cody has the time to run through the scenarios to see, okay, in if I was Nicole, what would I do in this situation? Maybe I would team up with Christmas. And then he would see, okay, we need to make sure make this decision, because there's so many days to think about it. Even after the veto not being used, there's so many days. And so, if this were rushed and we had a Tuesday eviction, maybe Cody doesn't realize that. And then we have a situation where, they make a different decision. So, it's kind of exhausting, especially for those that want to keep up with the feeds, because we don't want to rely on the show edit. But this is what we get with BB22.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, as somebody that, who now covers every single day in detail, that's in the past, what the tactic that you probably should use at this point in the game is start to move on to other things in your life. Like you'll get like, just honestly, just listen to the podcast, listen to the updates. You'll get the highlights. If anything crazy happens, you can always come back and be like, ooh, look at this. But if you're still like monitoring the feeds for like any change, like you're really setting yourself up for disappointment at this point.
It's akin to like when you're on a train and like your stop is next, you have to like get your stuff, really make sure to brush the crumbs off yourself, and then stand by the doorway. Like, you spend enough time in the train car watching the feeds for now double-digit weeks. It's okay to start transitioning yourself over, because as much as we talked about the languishing end game, before we know it, we're going to blink our eyes, and we're going to have a winner crowned here in a few weeks. So to Taryn's point, to the Mr. Live Feed himself, right, you have the express permission to be able to start looking to other things. Start making your Halloween costume, your BB22 right. Halloween costume.
I am here for you. This is I will provide for you. I will be here to watch for you. So you don't have to.
Taryn, we are so proud of you.
Thank you. I mean, I still haven't gotten any positive vibes, but I'm just like, it's not a big deal. I'm just saying that, I can't believe after I did specifically say to Mike, and I know you were listening, and I just feel like you intentionally didn't say positive vibes just now.
Yeah, but now I'm going to go onto a podcast with your mom, Taryn, and talk about why I chose to include that specific language.
Yeah, Taryn, you need to go ask Rob what people say on his podcast. Do they say they're proud of him, or do they not? I need you to go do that, like, right now.
Yes. Okay. I did talk to Rob the other day. Was it yesterday? I don't even remember at this point. It was yesterday. On the slop, we had some fun. We talked about the wall yeller who was trying to apparently wall yell at the jury.
I think maybe your conversations before about like essentially getting a life should be pointed at that one person specifically. Can we yell that conversation at him, to hold it over your head, say anything style, and be like, excuse me, sir, we know where you live now. Please stop doing this, please.
Well, hear me out. In the jury segment that we got, we heard from Ian about who's running the game. Now, there are a couple of things we know about Ian. One is that he appreciates information that wall yellers give him, right? Mm-hmm. Two, That I only had one. But basically, what if that Danny info came from the wall yeller? What if he was saying Danny's running the game because he heard a wall yeller say, Danny's running the game?
Honestly, I love this idea that was played before of, I mean, they should have fed into this in the house, but they can do it now in the jury house. Like, instead of, creating natural sounds of birds and serene waterfalls, loop wall yeller rumors that don't even make sense. Be like, Tyler was the one behind the JFK assassination, or like,
where's Jack? We need him.
Yeah, Enzo's in the Illuminati. Just like start playing all these rumors, because when you can't separate the signal from the noise, that's going to just solve all your problems at once. And hell, give this guy a job, bring him into the recording studio, put him in front of a Yeti for 2 hours, have him create the most cockamamie, asinine, wall yelling things possible, and then you're able to proliferate it. He gets some time in the spotlight, and you don't spread information or misinformation to your jurors. It's a win-win.
Very true.
There you go. All right. Well, basically what we have in front of us, this decision, we talked about, could Cody and Enzo flip this vote? Is it even in their best interest? At this point, it kind of seems like it might be for Enzo, because Nicole was talking to the cameras earlier today, and she was discussing that her ideal final three at this point actually might be Cody and Christmas. And I tend to agree, although I would honestly, let me take that back. I agree with the direction she's taking. I disagree with the layout there. I think her ideal final three is Christmas and Enzo. That's a much better final
but
three.
Cody is not a variable here. He's a constant, right? Like,
yes.
She has affirmed no matter what. And, jury's still a bit out as to whether, according to this conversation, it would be a final two. But I think she is locked in right now to have Cody at least make her final three plans, no matter what.
Yes.
Which is bizarre. Like, does she see how he dominates every single competition? It's really frustrating when it appears that people, you talk about this all the time, Taryn, that people aren't paying for their, like, they're doing things for their own, like, best interest, which a lot of times we see that people aren't. And it's like, are you playing to win, Nicole? Are you playing to have season 16 in the final two?
Yeah. I think she is. For as much as she's like, oh, Christmas and Cody, I unfortunately don't think that's with the plan in mind to win the final three HOH and cut Cody for Christmas, which I think wins her the game.
No, it's more so a safeguard of, hey, I want to be in the Andy Herron spot where if either one of them win, they're going to take me above the other person, which I do agree with. I think that sort of is like the worst case scenario. And that's why I also agree with you that I think Enzo evicting Memphis this week, given what we just found out, is a pretty boneheaded decision, because I'm pretty sure if Memphis gets evicted here, the only real way that Enzo stays without winning a competition next week is if it's him and Christmas up on the block, and Cody, not Nicole, is the sole vote to evict, which wouldn't even make sense because that would require Nicole winning the HOH that she can't win physically.
Well, basically, Cody, if him or Cody win the veto, right, I think he'll be fine. I'm inclined to believe that Cody keeps Enzo over Nicole, so he's fine that way. And then also, if he wins the HOH, he'll be fine. If I tried to do quick math, he's probably got like a 66% chance he doesn't win the HOH, and then 33% chance to leave in that case, if Memphis goes and Nicole and Christmas both are trying to get him out. Now, see, but then Christmas evicts Cody over Enzo, so we probably have to cut that around in half. But
that would be a situation where, again, Nicole's HOH, if Christmas is the sole vote, which she can't be. So you have to think that either, Nicole is definitely not HOH, so she's either going to be a nominee or she's going to be the sole vote to evict, which sort of tightens things up a bit.
Yeah, it looks like it's like, for a player like Enzo, who has been lock safe all season long, to all of a sudden head to the final four with even like 16% to go home is is like, whoa, whoa, I don't know about that. What's going on there? But you know, it's not great. And so, you know, we'll see. Here's the thing: Nicole might slip up. Christmas might slip up if they talk at all about plans for the Final Four. That could really screw things up, because that could get back to Enzo and or Cody, who would make it go back to Enzo, and then we could see a vote flip here if they feel like, oh well, you know, Nicole is going to want to go with Christmas, or even just, you know, Christmas is going to want to take Nicole at all costs in any scenario, whereas Memphis seems to want Nicole out. It's a tough call though, because Memphis is just so much more likely to win a competition, it feels. And can you really trust Memphis to make the call to take out somebody else over Nicole? At this point, actually, I feel like maybe you can, because she's won 2 competitions. And now all of a sudden she is a legitimate threat, and maybe he does just stick to his bros at that point. So I don't know.
Yeah, I'm just afraid that Christmas is going to put in some time with Nicole this week, because she really wants her to use it so that she can put Cody up, which it's like, Christmas, read the room. But she's going to say all of these things, and Nicole is just going to turn right back around, tell Cody and Enzo casually, not realizing that this is going to, you know, change their minds. And I was talking to my mom earlier. She watches the feeds. And I was like, I honestly think that Nicole's only chance at winning at this point is against Christmas. But she doesn't realize that.
I mean, first of all, your mom is amazing for watching the feeds. I mean, it's interesting, because I do wonder, I don't know. My hot take is, I think that Nicole, despite what you said, I think she still at this point has higher winner equity than someone like Enzo, who I do think the only way that he wins is like if, you know, he goes to the end with Cody, but like Cody cuts Nicole, as an example. You know, like if it's Cody Cody has to be the one to bring him rather than vice versa. So ironically enough, to win, he has to lose the final HOH and get brought there to basically show, so that he's not the one, you know, being essentially blamed as the Cody of like, how did you bring this big guy to the end when you had the one decision in your hands?
Doesn't Nicole have the same problem though, that she basically needs to lose the final 3 HOH, because otherwise she's taking Cody,
Right.
and then
she's the Cody.
Right, then she's the Cody taking Cody. Everyone's the Cody taking Cody at this point. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like what's the scenario where Nicole sits next to Enzo in the final 3? I guess it would have to be that Christmas wins the veto and takes out Cody in the final 4, that Cody's already gone. And then in the final 3, it's Nicole, Enzo, and Christmas, and then I don't know. But
Enzo
I think
wins
Enzo
the
would
final
have to win,
3.
because I think
Yeah.
Nicole has that path right there, and she's like, I got to go with Christmas right now. I got to ring that bell. I think Enzo does it's the parabola, right? He won competitions at the beginning of the season, then he beasts out at the end, and then takes Nicole. And then even then, you know, Nicole has some arguments. She's talked before about like, you could stand there and say, how did you let a winner get to the end twice? But even then, you know, if that's the path that Enzo's going to take specifically, which is very antithetical to the path he currently wants to go on, but he's sort of forced to go on it, I think he'd squeak one out at least. Yeah, above Nicole.
And I kind of, so in that final 3, I feel like both of them take Christmas. But you have to be careful. If Christmas is the Cody Slayer, like, you got to be a little careful of that. Exactly. I think that could give her major credibility in the jury. So I don't think there's any scenario where Enzo and Nicole end up in the final 2 together. I can't find it.
Yeah, I saw a tweet earlier from Andy Herron, and he was saying like, Cody, by far, if he makes it in, he deserves to win because he's played the best game. And at this point, anyone who gets Cody out is the best player because they slayed Cody. Then they deserve to win. But, you know, who besides Christmas is willing to slay Cody?
Memphis, maybe.
I mean, he would when it came to it, unlike Enzo or Nicole, I believe. But we've already seen this play out a little bit in the jury segment where Ian said, Danny's running the game. And then Danny showed up and she was like, Tyler took me out. And they were like, look, Tyler's running the game. And so it's really just probably going to be this sort of chain reaction. I don't think anybody's ever going to say Christmas is running the game, but to be the person that that beat out Cody and that took Cody out, I think really will give a lot of credibility to her argument. Despite that, it's still tough to see where her votes come from, though. If
Yeah.
we're looking at Davon, doesn't love Christmas.
I think she doesn't love her, but she didn't love Nicole either,
That's
and
true.
she gave her a vote.
Yeah,
so I
and
could see her
Nicole
trying to do the
stabbed
same
her.
thing.
Christmas stabbed her in the front many times, and Nicole stabbed her in the back. It's interesting, you know, when I do these word associations when I do interviews for Parade, and far and away the person who has the most consistent opinions about her is Christmas, namely how unstable she is. And I feel like that lightning can strike once in a case like Josh, where it was very unique scenarios where maybe Josh endeared himself to some of them with his goodbye messages. Maybe it was just due to the fact that he's not Paul. This doesn't feel like that type of situation where they would be like, despite my personal misgivings with you, Christmas Abbott, gosh darn it, you're just such a good Big Brother player that I have to give you my vote. You know, I think we can certainly talk later, Taryn, about whether or not your predictions for like a quote unquote bitter All-Stars jury will hold. But I do think that there will be some sort of like personal in play, in that there might be some optics of like, how is this person going to look if they end up winning the season? You talked about that with David's winning chances. And while I do think that Christmas, the more she stays, the more that grows. It grows from like maybe 5 to 6%. I don't know if I'm going like 5 to 15% in terms of winner equity.
I agree. Yeah. I agree. I think the problem is and this has been her problem since the very start of the game, that she just doesn't, people don't respect her. And that hasn't changed. People still don't respect her. If anything, their opinions of her have just solidified. And even if she did win one Final Four veto and took out Cody, I don't think that's enough. I think that she would have needed to have won one of these competitions in the Final Five and a Final Four win, maybe a Final Three win, just something to be like, I won out. I beat out Memphis. I beat out Cody. I beat out Nicole. Like, whatever it is. I think that's the narrative she needed to have any kind of momentum going to the final two. And I feel like even if she does snipe out Cody, I feel like it's going to be looked at as like, okay, she won one thing at the end and took out the best player, but still, like, what else did she do? So I agree. I think it opens the door a crack.
Yeah, exactly.
That, like, if then for some, maybe they have longer periods of time to answer jury questions because of COVID or something, and then maybe she blows them all away with her amazing speech
in rhyme.
In rhymes, yes.
Where she says, "This was the best jury ever assembled in Big Brother history. You have to vote for me to win."
Yeah, there you go. So yeah, I mean, so looking at this, it's gonna be, I think Nicole or Enzo still beat Christmas. Then it's I don't think they sit next to each other in the end at all. So that means that basically if they want to win, if either Nicole or Enzo want to win the game, they have to hope for like a Christmas veto, because otherwise, or they have to, like, obviously we're, just ignoring the idea that, like, oh, they could also cut Cody themselves. I think that just straight up wins them the game. Right. But it just doesn't feel like either one of them is willing to do that at this point.
It's more likely that a unicorn comes trampling into the house, serving them brunch, and they ride off on it to earn $500,000. That's not going to happen. I guess for me, like, my most ideal endgame outcome, and it's not ideal in terms of like, these are the two people I want to see at the end because that ship has sailed, but more so the most interesting one is, I don't know, maybe this is me trying to be optimistic, but I do see a Cody Nicole final two becoming slowly more interesting as the days pass, especially if Nicole keeps, like, if she pulls off an endgame streak here, that on top of what she may be able to spin with some things, like, I think this was a good segment for her. Actually, it was a mixed segment for her with the jury stuff, considering that Danny essentially just threw her under the bus for no particular reason in favor of Cody. But you have someone like Ian, who Nicole is directly responsible for getting rid of. It's like, respect. I admire that. And not to say that Ian is going to be a huge person of the jury, voice of the people, but I do think that lends some credence to the fact that, if the person that she most directly betrayed, Davon notwithstanding, is able to look at it for what it is, maybe there's a chance that she can at least rustle up more votes than we thought she would initially, at least before this week. So I'm not going to say that it's a Nicole win, but I would say it's probably the closest vote outcome of the scenarios outlined.
Yeah, I can see a path where she just won 2 comps in the final 5. If she wins the final 4 veto and evicts Enzo, like against Cody's will, and goes to the final 3 in a spot where she's guaranteed final 2, hopefully Cody doesn't cut her at the final 3 at this point because of what she just did to him. Then I could see her running with the narrative. Now, the problem is, again, I think if she wins the final 3 HOH and takes Cody over Christmas, I think that loses her any momentum that she gained, which means she would have to lose the competition.
Right.
Which then cuts off that momentum, which is a weird paradox.
Yeah, and give Cody the opportunity to potentially cut her for Christmas, which is the easy win, which would be interesting to see Cody in that spot again. But I do feel like she has a specific path where I think she might have a chance, which is cut Enzo, lose the final 3 HOH, be taken by Cody, and then maybe. The problem being that I think we still have Tyler and Danny who are going to be very pro. Although Tyler wanted Nicole to make a big move. I don't know if Enzo or Memphis is a big enough move for Tyler. I think he's going to want her to do the Cody move. And I'm not sure she's going to be able to fulfill those requirements. Obviously, Enzo's going to be pro Cody. That's 3. Memphis is probably going to be pro Cody. Yeah, I mean it's gonna be tough either way, but at least there's a path, there's a chance.
I think on top of that path, though, she needs to really assess her game and what she's done so far. So if she wants to spin it, that she was behind, like she was in the background of the committee and she let other people make the moves and she was a part of it. She needs to really, get that narrative straight in her head, because earlier today when she was like, oh, I was on the block with David and he's played once and I played 3 times. That was a huge move. I stayed. I won. That was a huge move. No, Nicole, you had nothing to do with that. That was all Enzo trying to please Cody.
I was gonna say, in fact, you were almost gone.
Exactly.
You were that good. You were that good of a player that you almost left when you were on the block against David.
Exactly. So she needs to get that together on top of that path. But so are we saying that if Cody and Enzo decide to cut Christmas this week, that Nicole is losing no matter what?
Probably.
Yeah. I mean, I think,
Probably.
I totally agree with Taryn right now that I think Memphis has by far the second highest chance of winning. And I think him staying in the game is bad for her, because I think if he goes, she nudges up to that silver medal. Right now, she is like bronze at best. And that's a very dull bronze.
Yeah, participation.
I mean, right now, I'd say it's, well, with Memphis gone, or if Memphis stayed, I'd say it's Cody, Memphis, Enzo, Nicole, with Nicole like just drawing dead, basically. If Memphis goes, I'd say it's Cody, Nicole, Enzo.
Yeah, Christmas, who's drawing dead, basically. So, yeah. For Enzo, it's definitely a good move to keep Memphis around, I think. Exactly. So, which goes back to my thing of like, it's boneheaded to get rid of him when you just look at those droppings, but it all depends on like your perspective of things. And I think Enzo has been so devoutly loyal to Cody that I think maybe he just isn't necessarily seeing the forest for the trees in that regard, or maybe he's not necessarily predicting. I would not say this is akin to what happened at the Final Four in Big Brother All-Stars, but it's like it has shades of it, right? Like 2 people from sort of disparate sides of an alliance comparing notes about, okay, who our best chance of winning is taking each other. What of all these 3 guys have like just been in various, configurations with us. We should be the ones to come together. To your point, we'll see if it happens. This might just be entertaining options to while the days away. But at least this has been the most heart stimulating part of the past 7 days, in my opinion.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I guess either way, Enzo is the bronze medalist in terms. He's 3rd place either way, but yeah, I mean, it's a tough call, and I one of the lessons he took away from Big Brother 12 was at the final four of Big Brother 12, Hayden wanted me to do. He wanted me to take out Lane, and I said no. I took out Brittany instead. And now he's probably thinking like, now's the opportunity. I need to take out Memphis instead of Christmas. And in this case, I think it's actually flipping the other way. Although, like I said, I'm actually not sure it's super cut and dry, because I think either way he's still the third most likely to win. But I do think that what he's doing is he's giving Nicole. He even said this to Cody last week. Hey, yo, you need Tyler on your resume, yo. That's it. And he wanted Memphis on his resume, so why not save Memphis for next week and do it next week, right?
When you are the sole vote, because that's the thing as well. Like, that's Final Four is such an interesting thing, because you're like, this, I have the one vote that can do this. I guess he sort of did that with David, ironically enough, of all things, that he was the one vote. Here, if he says like, oh, Memphis was my thing, Cody could very easily be like, well, actually, I voted alongside you. And if I had voted a different way, Nicole would have broken the tie in my favor. So really, I was in control of the week. It's a much easier narrative to write when you have the sole pen in your hand, rather than you and another person like signing a lease together in order to sign off on one person's eviction.
Especially after seeing the episode, like, I definitely didn't know that Cody had this opinion about himself where he was like, all I have to do is snap my fingers and the decision changes. It's like he knows how much control he has in this house. So he knows that whatever he wants to happen is going to happen, from his perspective, especially this week with it only being 2 votes. But I didn't realize he felt that way.
Yeah, I keep thinking about the votes, Nicole versus Cody, and I feel like no matter how it happens, I still can't find the votes for her. Especially if Devon's not a vote for her, then I think it's like especially a done deal. I'm not sure where they come from, and which leads me back to like I think no matter what, if she wants to win the game, I think she has to cut Cody.
Right.
Because I can't figure it out. Let me know if you guys figure out like a voting scenario where she could possibly. Because I just feel like Memphis isn't gonna give it to Nicole. Danny clearly doesn't seem to be in that direction. Enzo isn't going in that direction.
Especially if Cody's not the one to cut him, because that's the thing. Like if it's Cody, Enzo, Nicole, and Cody votes out Enzo, there's a slim chance that Enzo is just so like, oh my God, yo, this happened again. Like I can't do this again. I'm just gonna throw my vote to Nicole. I still can't believe if he's just so stunned by everything. What's really not helping Nicole is that Danny is by far the most vocal person in Cody's corner.
She really needed Danny.
Yeah, and Danny, you saw from like the way she was received when she entered the jury, there are a lot of people that respect Danny's opinion there. Davon, Kevin, like even David to a certain extent, they all hold Danny in high favor. And so I think she's the one that they're going to be most likely to listen to. And so as much as we thought like, okay, maybe Danny going could be good for Nicole's game, and ended up becoming really tough, that ironically enough, the person that stabbed her in the back the most in Danny's warped worldview of I was the big lion and he came in and gunned me down, despite him being my best friend, I admire that. Like, she's going to be the nail in her coffin.
Yeah, a second ago, I was thinking, okay, if Nicole cuts Enzo, she can frame it like, okay, I know I wanted to be in a situation where either one of the people would take me to the final 2. And I knew Enzo and Cody were super close, so I had to cut his other half. But then you're going to have Danny thinking, oh, you just wanted to be closer to Cody. Which is the whole reason she's so mad, is that Cody chose her over Danny, essentially. So in that situation, there's no way Danny would ever be rooting for Nicole over Cody.
Yeah. And that's the problem. I think it's impossible to win a jury vote if your closest ally in the jury is like the most anti-voting for you person.
Right. So like imagine like Big Brother Canada 6 if Maddie gets sent to the jury and she's like, you know what? Screw Paris. I love Kayla. Kayla's been great. She's screaming until she's hoarse on finale land. Like, you did that, Kayla. You did that. It's so tough because now Danny has, and this again speaks to the extended end game, Danny has an entire month to tell people, every person who walks in there, how great Cody's game is. And she's going to have people coming in saying the same thing. It's very, very tough. Nicole is probably praying at this point for a Big Brother 10-esque sit down with a juror and talk to them, because that's what she needs at this point.
And that's the problem, that Danny is the person who is the foremost Nicole expert. Nicole has doubled down on this. Danny was my final two. I was most close to Danny all season long. And because what happens is somebody makes it to the end and your mind tries to rationalize why it happened. Oh, well, she must have done something, right? Maybe at this point she was doing this, or maybe at this point she was doing this. Danny's going to be there to be like, no. I was with her the whole time. I talked everything through with her. She was doing none of this. She was doing whatever Cody told her to do. The week I was HOH and Ian was getting sent home, she was whining like a baby while Cody made the decision. Like, she holds the door she holds it closed for anybody that wants to give Nicole any credit. If she doesn't have Danny, she can't win this game, I feel like.
All right, so then here's the thing that needs to happen. You have an extended Final Four week into a Final Three. Unleash a power into the house. Juror nullifier. And Nicole is going to have to somehow have the foresight to nullify her closest ally.
It comes with duct tape.
Yeah.
She can't speak to the jury anymore. She's out.
And it binds her hands as well into like little mitts, so she can't sign anything. So ironically, Nicole's going to have some sort of 6th, 7th, even 8th sense to say, I think my closest ally might not be in my corner in the jury house. I don't think she's going to vote for me. Let me cut her from the jury.
Right. When it's so funny that the person that she was sitting against is the one that she's most upset with. Who
You're
had
usually
nothing
in
to
the
do with
clear.
it. Yeah.
I didn't even do it. I didn't even vote you out. Oh man. So yeah, and that's the thing too, is that Christmas is the only person at this point I think that Danny would be like, no, I definitely hate Christmas more than Nicole.
Yeah.
And then she would be like, no, I was with Nicole during the Ian week. It was all a master plan. Then she would give Nicole all the credit in the world. So again, I feel like if she wants to win, she has to cut Cody. So if she's not willing to, I just feel like it's not in the cards.
Could it be a thing where like Paulie gets in a big bobsled accident at the Olympic Training Center and Cody has to leave the game and it's Nicole and Enzo sitting in the final two? Is that an option for Danny to then be able to stump for her with nary a scent of Cody on anyone's nostrils?
Maybe, but again, I feel like they just take Christmas at that point, and it's not even an issue.
This is when Nicole's strategy of only hanging out with the people that she likes throughout the whole game is faulty, because she liked Danny the most, so she hung out with her the most. So there's like the jury has not like. They have no other option but to believe Danny because she spent the most hours with Nicole. So yeah,
I mean, it worked out beautifully for her in 18 because she sent Corey into the jury with specific instructions for like, this is what you need to say about my game. And so the people who she didn't interact with had to take it on their word that she was doing all these things. And that's why people like Davon ended up voting for Nicole. It worked amazingly. And this time around, it has backfired in a dramatic way in that Danny is the only one there, and it's going to take too long. Like, again, Cody's the only other person that could stump for her in the jury, and she's not going to cut him. So yeah, it's not great. It does seem like Cody right now is doing a soft sell. Getting rid of Memphis does nothing for me. Getting rid of Christmas is beneficial for me, Nicole. And
she has a very confused look on her face.
Oh God, this is why I hate the stupid, like, whatever the HOH wants. Because again, like, he does not necessarily need her express permission. And it really is the root that is in charge of this week. Now, granted, that sets him up a bit more unsafely for the Final Four. But if they feel like the two of them, would just have it unlocked, especially with Memphis as well, then they feel like it might be more of a done deal if they just, get rid of Christmas. Yeah, we'll tick off Nicole. But like you said before, Taryn, like, it was pretty unlikely that she would join up with Christmas. It is extremely unlikely that her and Memphis decide to go against them at the Final Four.
Yeah.
But you know what? Even with Christmas, the scenario with Christmas versus Nicole with Danny. So Danny told Nicole before she left, like, if you don't do anything else, get out Christmas. So is she gonna see that as even a slap in the face if Nicole ends up in the final two with Christmas? I guess if she takes her, but if Christmas takes Nicole, then that's a different story.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it seems I don't think it's worth it for Cody to just full on snake Nicole with the vote, because then he's leaving himself vulnerable in the final four. Like, well, again, like, no, he's not, because she can't take Memphis to the final three,
and she can't win HOH. Like, she has to rely on winning that veto to be able to like snake him back, which would be a little unlikely because again, it's one competition versus two.
And who is Nicole gonna take in the final three? If she has a choice between either Cody, Enzo, or Memphis, you know, two of the three of them, she's still probably going to just take Cody, right? Like, Enzo also screwed her over, and she has no reason to believe that she'd like stomp Enzo in a jury vote. And then, you know, Memphis would definitely beat her at that point as like the underdog who made it there. Like, so she probably just still takes Cody.
Right. I mean, I think also there's probably some psychology there as well of, oh, if I take Cody, then, you know, at least I won't be blamed for doing all these moves. I could say we did it together. You know, it's almost like the opposite of why you would cut one of your closest allies before the end and you take credit for all the moves. It's more so, no, now we'll share the blame of it. As opposed to if it's her versus Memphis, it could be like, well, look at all this bad stuff Nicole did and look at all this good stuff Memphis did that could kind of like shuffle off any anger towards Cody or Danny could be foisted onto Nicole for being blamed for doing all these things.
Yeah. So yeah, I feel like it's probably even better for Cody than it is for Enzo at this point. Like, I mean, it still could go either way, but I do feel like just go ahead and enforce it. Just keep Memphis. Maybe that is the play. But again, then you risk Memphis winning one of those competitions and maybe turning around on you, or you're just staying until the final three, which is not ideal necessarily. But you know, it's all these decisions you can go back and forth so many times.
It's interesting because you have to look at like, so I mean, I can't do the times for the veto. They probably weren't that, because Memphis I think is more a physical liability than an asset with like all of his broken odds and ends. And I'm assuming so he might be good for, depending on how they do Final Four HOH. It's usually before or after, but this past season in BB21 it was surprisingly endurance for some reason. So maybe he has a chance at the HOH, but veto might be tough because it's more about like dexterity usually and memorization. And then final three, he'd have to get through endurance and another physical aspect to get to the questions, which he's good at. So Memphis might have reached his stopping point in terms of competitions, depending on how they phase out. Because as you mentioned many times, Taryn, if things are as physical as they have been the past few times, Memphis can only go so far with a block that he turns from true to false, you know?
It's true. It's very true. You know, the only physical competitions that Memphis has won were one where he was standing still, and one where all he needed to do is literally run back and forth and build a puzzle, right? So yeah, I mean, I would expect that there are definitely physical components. Now, if it was like the catapult launching thing that they did last season, I think he could do that. It's just required like, oh no, you know what, it was a lot of running around. That was the big thing, and I don't know if he has the cardio to go that
Not
that
at
long.
all.
I mean, he did during the maze, but again, like I don't know exactly how
The maze was about 6 minutes.
Yeah.
I think what was the time? Did they time it? Yeah, they must have been a time, right? The Jackson. I still feel it. How long did it take Jackson to win that competition? Does anyone know off the top of the head? Probably not. I remember it took Cliff like 40 minutes or something, though, because it was so much running to get the balls that you missed. But anyway.
Yeah, because I think we're a little far away from even like the aforementioned, I think it was 17 or 18 when they brought in Beast Mode Cowboy, and it was just like punch things a bunch of times to do a number of days. I feel like they're very much into now like traversing the backyard back and forth a number of times.
Yeah.
I mean, they have kind of gone back. Like the competitions have been more throwback than like recent lately. But so, maybe it is a little more stationary. But who knows? Either way, the comics veto that just took place. Nicole had 11 minutes. Memphis, Enzo, and Christmas were all above 27. So
Whoa.
they did
that's
very
crazy.
poorly.
Do we know if it was the typical zip line one, or was it like the BB20-esque, like make your way through a whole obstacle course?
It was the zip line one. That's so Memphis obviously is gonna have trouble with that. Christmas just couldn't. Both Christmas and Memphis had trouble figuring out, and I imagine Enzo did as well. They couldn't figure out the differences. But yeah, I mean, if it had been the obstacle course one, I would have expected Memphis to actually do better, but still probably wouldn't have beaten Cody.
Has anyone complained about their comics names yet? I know that Enzo was talking about his whiskers, so I'm assuming we got like an official meow meow superhero.
I didn't catch enough of that. No, I think feeds came back like 15 minutes ish before the podcast. So
I did hear Nicole say she was, or Christmas was talking to Nicole about it, and she was like, "Oh, aren't you glad you didn't have anything wedding related?" So
yeah.
they didn't
Oh, is that a
have
sign?
that. I know.
Is that are the positive vibes from the comic book creators?
Right. Hint, hint.
Mm-hmm. Looks like the Cody Nicole conversation is landing back on the side of Memphis. Does need to go for now. Telling though that he brought it up again. We'll see where that goes. I imagine this will be similar to last week, where it's like it could flip, but it probably won't.
Well, yeah, I think you brought up a good point in last week's, where it's like when I don't know, usually when you bring up a first point and you bring up another alternative, it's hard to get things back to that original topic. But maybe it's just there's so few numbers, and because Cody and Nicole are so, at least they figure, in lockstep, they might shoot down more of those alternative ideas than like taking an idea and running with it of, wait a minute, maybe Christmas should go. So we'll see. It might not be as much of an easy sort of pivot as it was from Christmas to Tyler last week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for as much as forcing the move, forcing Memphis to stay against Nicole's will, it's really not Cody's style. He really is more of like he's the person that will give Nicole what she wants this week, and then next week he'll just talk her out of evicting Enzo if she wins the veto. Is she really gonna make that move? If Cody is there, like, you're not gonna snake me on this, right? Like, is she really gonna make that move?
She was already nervous to put up Memphis and Christmas.
Yeah.
And there's literally two other options she's locked in with.
Because she's got to be worried that because there's going to be a whole week of her holding that veto and Cody saying, no, what are you doing? And then she's going to have to worry, like, if I snake Cody like this, he's not going to take me to the final two. He's going to take Christmas, the easy win. And he's a lot more likely to beat me than Enzo or Christmas is. So I don't think she cuts Enzo.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, yeah, this might be, again, falling on the downside of it being extended days. It's also just, it gives Cody more time to essentially guilt Nicole, right? To be like, don't do this. Hey, good morning. Don't do this. Good night. Don't do this. Wake up the next day. We have nothing to do except for me to just tell you why you shouldn't be doing this. So he has that much more time to get in her ear or stay in her ear about why she shouldn't make a decision that, as you've talked about, is, I mean, if in a perfect world, she would cut Cody over both of them, but really, I guess the second best option, and she would end up pursuing the third best option because of Cody.
Yeah. All right. I think that, I mean, look, that was a fun discussion, actually.
Yeah.
I feel like we had some.
I think there's some fun discussion because, even though we're 3 weeks away from the finale, things are shaping up to be interesting, at least more interesting than they were a couple weeks ago. As
Definitely.
Some people are starting to look maybe other unexpected places as to what to do this week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Cody's already sweet talking Nicole right now. Like, you and I are such a good spot to be in the final two. Enzo can't win a thing. We just need to take Enzo there. It'll be great. Yeah. So that's where I think this is gonna go. It looks like Hamster Watch had some of the comics written down here.
Ooh, okay.
I see Bailey's Comet was one.
Okay.
Christmas Mrs. Claus, she'll slay you.
Okay, well, anything is better than, like, I'm surprised they didn't do, like, Fa La La Lunatic 2.
Right.
Danny the Regulator. She married into the worst alliance.
Oh, jeez. That's a deep pull. The gardener was right there.
Yeah. Enzo Meow Meow, don't let this cat get you by the tongue.
Yeah, what? Why would the cat what are you doing with your cat if it's getting your tongue, if your tongue's readily available for it?
Kevin Bandana.
I mean, he wore a lot of bandanas.
Because he wore the bandana.
Unless it's Mandana, maybe?
Oh, it says Mal
It's a
on
missed
a lion?
opportunity.
Is that a typo or am I missing something? MAL on a lion.
Mal on
Bandana. The bandanimal.
Oh, bandanimal. Wait, so is he like some sort of like is he also an animal? Is he like a thundercat?
I guess.
Oh, so he's just so he's like a beastmaster.
Yeah, I guess so. And then Nicole the serial killer, spelled cereal as in Matt Klein's.
Right.
Why?
Is she mad? Is she
well, I guess she was the box of sloppies, so I guess that makes her like.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, it's Nicole. If there's a scene with Nicole Franzel, her comic book name has to be a reference to a costume that she wore, right? So I guess they're just making a 3 for 3.
Yeah. They didn't get Davon, something with a nightmare. Tyler, they didn't get. King Kaser.
Okay, that's nice.
Naturally.
Keisha, birthday girl, popping out of a cake.
Oh, amazing. Okay, I got very close because my guess that I did on the B&B was I think the Cake Crusader. So I think that's maybe the closest I came. Unless I'm crossing my fingers that Janelle was real Tour of the Living House, which I've been holding out my hope for the past 7 weeks. I hope it happens.
I have a feeling that all of yours are going to be better than the ones we
Well, no. I mean, if you listen last week, my superhero name for Danny was Knee, and it was just a giant knee.
What about the gardener? Where did that come from?
Well, it was preseason. I didn't know that she would become the gardener. Okay. I guess I was very tired and bored, and so I thought, well, knee. I guess it's a giant kneecap that does something to fight crime.
Yeah, the regulator's better than knee. David and Goliath was David's, which is pretty appropriate, I think. Nicole A on air with her podcast.
Okay.
I wonder how Nicole Franzel felt about that. They didn't give me a podcast.
Or is my podcast still on?
I'm assuming the slogan for Nicole A on air is like Nicole Franzel isn't invited, or like Danny declined an invite.
Yeah. Don't mind my friend.
Yeah, exactly. My co-host.
Janelle the bombshell.
Okay. I mean. It's fine. I mean, I don't know. Is she in the all-star costume at least? I feel like that's one you could take advantage of.
Probably not, because I don't know how that correlates to Bombshell. Also, there was an alliance called the Blonde Bombshells, or the Bombshells. I don't know if it was the Blonde Bombshells, but it was something. No, it was Blitzing Bombers. Was that it? And then today she was talking with Christmas about Blonde Bombshells. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm excited to see the graphics, what they come up with. I already have just an image of what Bandanimal is, particularly. I want to see if he's clothed. I think that's my first question as to whether Bandanimal is like completely nude or if he's actually like in safari clothing riding some sort of big jungle cat.
That's my guess. That would be my guess. The second one.
Let's go risque here. Let's have him just be completely bodysuit, cheetah print nude, riding with his blanket like a cape over him, saying, yes! I know exactly what's happening.
There it is.
Right.
All right, let's talk about the Legacy Watch. This is what we have from last week in the Legacy Watch. Janelle in the Pantheon, followed by Kaser, Tyler, and Cody in the top tier. Enzo, Nicole Franzel, Ian, Memphis, and Davon in the upper tier. Danny, Keisha, and Bailey in the middle tier. And then Kevin, Christmas, Nicole Anthony, and David in the low tier. So let's go through this. How has this been updated this week? We're going to start from the bottom, as always. But first, Asia, Mike, do you have any predictions for this week?
So I have two. First, I think Cody's leapfrogging Tyler here. I think that he is going to be number 3 at the moment. And depending on how he does, he might get close to Kaser by the end of the season. And my other one is that I think all 4 people who were shown in the Jury House segment, so Ian, Davon, Kevin, David, and Danny, I guess all 5 of them, I think they may not like get a bump up in terms of leapfrogging anybody or moving up and down rank, but I think they're all going to get like an increase in scores, if that makes sense. Because I do feel like the Jury House segment was like pretty favorable to them overall. There was some weirdness with the Danny stuff, but I usually feel like the Jury House segments have net favorability for a lot of these jurors because you're like seeing them out of the house. A lot of them, you know, endear themselves to the audience by being like, wow, I was stupid now that I got evicted for doing all this. And I feel like we got that general sense from them. And so I, you know, especially for like David, who is the bottom of the bottom, I don't know if he'll claw his way out of the bottom, but I can imagine he at least gets a bit more favorability this week than he did last week.
Yeah, my two predictions would be that Davon would go up in terms of score, maybe not jumping over Memphis, but that she will go up, and then maybe or definitely that Cody will overtake Tyler, and that Tyler might go down to upper tier.
All right. Well, let's get into this. First, right off the bat here, we have David, still in last place, who actually fell back down to the bottom tier.
No.
They did
Whoa.
it to him. They pushed him back. They said, no, David, we don't want you here anymore. Go back to the bottom tier.
What
Right.
happened? Were people just like, oh yeah, David? Like now that he's not in the game and not an underdog, has it just now officially come around? And they're like,
Right.
oh right, now I remember what David did. Let's put him in the bottom tier.
I honestly, I don't know. I don't want to spoil anything, but this is not isolated to David.
Oh no!
Not necessarily the bottom
Whoa.
tier, but just there are a lot of people who did not move favorably this week.
But I'm trying to remember, like, did David do anything in that Jury House segment? Literally, I'm asking, did he do anything? I can't remember him saying a thing in that Jury House segment.
I don't know. I mean, you know,
He walked
granted,
in.
Yeah. You know, he was in the bottom tier like all season long, and it was
Right.
it was just the last 2 weeks that he managed to barely make it into the low tier. So, I mean, I think that you know, he without being in the house, without being reminded that he's an underdog anymore, he may have lost that kind of like that little bit of oomph he needed to stay there. So.
Yeah, there was a little bit of sympathy last week, right? Of like the sole person who wanted to evict him during that triple eviction ended up winning. And so it was like, well, there was a chance for him to make it through and maybe crack the alliance. And I guess now that sort of is in the rear view mirror, people are like, let's get back to reality here. David sucks as a player, right? Okay, bottom tier.
Right.
We're good. Moving on.
Yeah, I think that was all hoping that he was going to be in a better position. And then when it was like we were faced with reality, it was like, okay, people came to their senses.
Yeah. All right. Well, above David is Nicole Anthony, who has still cleared the bar. She is still in the low tier, but barely.
Wow.
She is barely clinging on. She has continued to fall week after week, and she is now just a hair above the line. She might fall into the bottom tier at this rate. She will fall into the bottom tier if she continues at this rate.
Interesting. Yeah, because I know that last time I was on here, I think it was for the Janelle week 3 that we had said like, well, maybe with Nicole on social media, like there'll be she'll poke fun at herself, like she'll endear herself back to people. That has not happened
At all.
at all. In fact, the opposite. I know that when I was on the slop a couple of weeks ago, there was actually some like kind of shadiness on her part at the behest of Janelle and Kaser that Janelle called her out on. So like, I do not think that the Nicole Anthony apology tour has necessarily been working. So maybe that's one reason why she continues to downslide here a bit.
Yeah, it's definitely I would imagine a part of it. I think in general as well though, like I think it really matters what kind of a taste people left in your mouth when they left the game, and then over time you don't see them anymore. It starts to solidify more and more, perhaps. And I think also just in general, like out of mind or out of sight, out of mind is a big thing. And so she is just going to continue to drop here. Above Nicole is Kevin Campbell, who dropped below Christmas in the low tier.
Well, okay. Well,
Hey.
I'm glad one of my predictions is going about as well as Denis did for my superhero predictions. Wow, interesting. I thought that like the Kevin we were seeing in the jury house was sort of like a bit of the Kevin that we had always wanted to see in this season, a smidge, in that he was like really showing a little bit of fire now that he is out of like the pressure of the house. I'm a little surprised, though maybe it's another David thing of like, well, now that Kevin's gone, now that he's officially no longer an underdog, can we acknowledge the fact that he was not very good this season?
Right. I think it's simply that. And the fact, I mean, well, I know he went down, but the fact that Christmas is still there would if she went up, I think that would make sense because, yeah, Kevin just didn't display any type of gameplay that would, I guess, improve his legacy this season.
Yeah, I can tell you the points wise. I've said this before, but each tier is a range of 10 points. They were 2 points away from each other last week, Kevin and Christmas. This week, Kevin lost a point and Christmas gained a point. They met in the middle, and Christmas just barely edged out Kevin in the low tier, and that is where she is right now, in the low tier, just barely above Kevin. I mean, I think she is right now getting that little bit of underdog boost that David was getting before. That
Yep,
people are
exactly.
hoping she wins comps. They're hoping she takes out Cody. And I would imagine this is not a permanent boost unless she like goes on to win the game or something, or take out Cody.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, that's what I'm hoping. Again, maybe this is my own personal proclivities, but I just feel like, and maybe this will reflect back at the end of the season of like coming in, I think people were wondering like, well, you know, Christmas can't be as bad as she was in Big Brother 19. And she's kind of worse from a certain personal perspectives. And so I personally would put her in my bottom tier. But to your point, Taryn, I think there is a minimal amount of investment. She is like a 16-year savings bond that you throw some pennies into every month at this point to be like, this might yield something. And so that might cause her to be on a slight uptick, especially as people like Kevin and David are on the downside.
Yeah, because even like BB19 Christmas, like I always chalked it up to her situation. Like, it must suck to have a broken foot, and you thought you were going to be this comp beast. But then it's like, what's your excuse this season? Why are you the way that you are?
I was going to say, like, quote Michael Scott to Toby, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's Christmas in the low tier. Above Christmas is still Bailey, but having dropped down into the low tier.
What is in people's like coffee this week?
I'm telling you, everybody's taking a hit this week, including Bailey, who, I mean, has just been like living life as far as I'm concerned.
Best life.
What's she doing?
She's been living her best life.
I don't understand. Maybe getting rid of, like, was it that bringing up Tyler this week brought up the whole Bailey Davon situation that just cast a pall over all parties? I'm legitimately questioning. I'm not going full friendship in season 6 and being like, America, y'all suck. But I'm just very confused right now, I'll be honest.
Maybe it's just the fact that she's been gone so long. People are forgetting why they had her middle, or like why they, you know, would rank her a little bit higher for her to be middle tier.
I will also say, and I don't want to start anything between Bailey and Tyler fans, but I would imagine that this week, you know, a lot of emphasis is put on Tyler as the person who left, that there might be an extra bump of Tyler fans who made sure to vote in this particular survey, who might be a little bit less inclined to like Bailey.
But if Tyler's game has to fall, then Bailey's going down with him.
It could be a situation too where Bailey fans are no longer interested in the season and are no longer watching, therefore no longer listening and voting and ranking.
Yeah. And to be fair as well, she was clinging on to the middle tier last week. She was just barely above the line. She did drop a couple of points, but she was barely in the middle tier to begin with. So above Bailey is still Keisha, still in the middle tier.
Okay. Oh my God. I was like, people have gone too far if Kate Crusader, birthday girl herself, stays in the middle tier. I don't know. Is Keisha sort of like the tide line right now because she's so innocuous in the season that like she is the true middle tier, and everyone below her are unfavorable, and everyone above her are pretty favorable.
I guess so. She did take a small hit this week, but she was firmly enough in the middle tier that it was not enough to drop her significantly. So she's set here. She's fine. But I still feel like there's too many new school fans who just don't even know Keisha from Big Brother 10, who are just like, oh, she's just a first boot.
Yeah.
No.
Let me also say, because I think this will also play into like the Tyler conversation of it all. I mean, I look upon returning players in a weird way, in that I almost view each performance as what it is, which is like a separate performance, almost like when an actor appears in a set of movies. Like they might be really good in one movie and not good at all in another movie, and that does not make me look one way or the other towards the actor. So I'll say that like Keisha in Big Brother 10 is absolutely iconic, and I don't think it should have any effect as to how we view Keisha in general if she had a bad time on Big Brother 22, especially to your point, Taryn, when you brought up last week that there were many extenuating circumstances, including the shortened first week, working against her then.
Yeah. All right. Above Keisha is Davon,
What?
who dropped down into the middle tier.
Whoa.
Why? What did she do?
So I can say, again, this is a situation. Davon barely made upper tier last week. And in fact, I do leave these surveys up after the podcast, and some people continue to like roll in. I'm looking at last week, the score. She had actually fallen into the middle tier after the podcast last week. So there was already momentum in this direction. But similar to many of the other people on this list, she had a couple of points dropped from last week, and that has pulled her down into the middle tier.
Man.
It's weird though, because I feel like, I don't know, like maybe this is again like why Twitter is not a representation of the community, because like looking at my timeline Thursday night, everyone's like, yes, I'm so glad Davon's on our jury segment,
Right?
Davon for AFP. So I'm like, great, this was the pop that she needed, but it was the fizzle apparently.
We got a Davon jury segment, and she was fun in it.
Yeah.
Right. She was so fun. And I'm trying to think, did she have a game opinion that would have been unpopular?
I guess it was the whole like Ian thing where Ian's like, well, I don't begrudge Nicole for getting rid of me. And Davon said, I did. Yeah, so I don't know. It's an interesting choice. I'd be intrigued to hear from people. I mean, I guess from like a player perspective, now it's sort of like the thing with David and Kevin, where now you're starting to look back on particularly the way that she ended her game was not particularly savory. But I don't know. I just said assume that maybe the visibility spike might have helped her case, at least above somebody like Danny, who also like had a very weird jury segment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also want, I'm really reaching at this point, but perhaps like we didn't see a jury segment with her being like, David, I'm so sorry, I got it wrong.
True.
Like,
that could have helped.
Which, like, because I'm pretty sure they already had that moment. They just I was on the show, but they didn't show it on the show because it was from a wall yeller. But that could have something to do. But again, it's fairly consistent with a lot of other drops from a lot of the other evicted house guests this week. So
maybe it's just a general thing to your point, Taryn, of like season fatigue. Or people just like being like, okay, this season, like this was maybe for some people another disappointing week, whereas like another predictable boot, and so they're just like downvoting nearly everybody. Like you suck. Right. It's that thing that happened every season where like someone would throw water bottles at the screen whenever people were doing their confessionals. I'm describing it in a very poor way, but like maybe people are doing that now through their votes.
I mean, I would say that like maybe it's a survivor bias. Like the people voting are the people who are still interested enough to like pay attention, and that means they probably still have a vested interest, which means they're probably more fans of the people that are in the game. I would have said that, but the number of voters is like very on par with what I've gotten all season. In fact, it's actually a little bit more than I usually get. So I have no idea what happened.
Wow. Maybe they knew there wasn't much to discuss, so they were just, changing things up to give us more to talk about.
Making a big move, in the Legacy Watch.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So above Davon is Danny, who let me tell you, literally, to get into the upper tier, you need a score of 40 or higher. She has a 39.99 right now.
So close.
Okay, so of basically all the people that were on that jury segment, I mean, we haven't gotten to Ian yet, but Danny is like the lone person so far to actually get a bump in score from it.
Exactly. She got a boost. She got a boost. There it is.
Maybe it's just because we're finally seeing the rage from her, like her, she's hurt, the committee voted her out, and like we're getting to see those raw feelings. So maybe people like that.
Yeah, I mean, it could be, it was a bit like, okay, we're seeing the Danny that we like, the Danny of old, and the jury. Could also help that she is stumping for Cody, who I think that whether people begrudgingly do so or favorably do so are sort of buying into right now as like, probably the best player in the game right now, and definitely someone that a lot of people are at least thinking will win the season at this point. So it's like, all right, Danny, you're on the money. I'm going to give you credit for that. That's my thinking. She, again, it was a big surprise to see her throw Nicole under the bus in favor of Cody. But I feel like when it comes to like the narrative of the house, it maybe helps Danny that she's able to do that and be able to maybe brush herself off that Cody was the one to betray her and say, well, I appreciate that, so I'm going to give you a lot of credit for it.
Yes, and I can say I just refreshed the page, and she has actually gone up a couple.
Okay, perfect. Awesome.
She has made it into the upper tier. I will continue to refresh until the end of this segment.
Yeah, I want now people just throw it back and forth. And I will also say, I think that personally, I would put her in the upper tier just because I think when we look back on this season, I do think that Danny is going to stand out as like one of the big parts of it, where again, she did not make it all the way, but I think she was one of the largest sources of drama in that middle stretch of game for a large portion of time. And I do think that has some bearing on whatever metric you use to judge this type of legacy.
I also think, and again, she got a boost. It wasn't a huge boost. She moved up like 1 point, basically from her previous week. But I think that heading into the jury and having Ian say Danny's running the game, having Davon be so pro Dan, I think it gave her the sort of the air of I was a big player that got taken out, which is a very different view. And I tweeted about this, that like her view of her own game is very different than our view of her game over the course of the season, where we just saw her slow and inevitable downfall. She saw herself as like, I was the Derek, I was running the game, and then I got sniped out of the game. And the show gives her perspective from the jury. She says, I was running the game, I was doing so well, and I got sniped. And it's backed up by Ian and Davon, who are like, yeah, right, Danny was running the game. And so I wonder how much that had to do with it as well. I also noticed, by the way, when I tweeted that out of nowhere, like the Danny stands are back. They got mad at me for that tweet. And I've been tweeting about Danny's game all season long to thunderous applause. But all of a sudden they're back. So there's a resurgence here.
Yeah, I mean, it is sort of like a posthumous thing, right? Of like, well, now that she's gone, we can like remember the legacy of her, as opposed to like, well, we don't need to talk about her presently because
right,
she's doing some stuff in the house that we're not big fans of.
Yeah. All right. So above Danny is still Memphis here in the upper tier. He's still there. He could be leaving this week. I think if he leaves, he'll probably stick around in this upper tier. I think he had a good performance over the course of the season. I think he exceeded expectations from what like we thought we were going to get from him.
Even from week 2. Yeah, exactly. Like I think following one of the most confusing, borderline and disastrous HOH weeks ever, to have what we thought he was going to be the next coming of Devin Shepard to end up, becoming a possible 5th place finisher, voted out as one of the biggest threats to win, is very, very different. I will say that I think if we get another Jury House segment next week, which probably should, because there's not much to show on Thursday nights.
We should every week.
Yeah. And if we see a more favorable Danny stuff, there's a chance she might be able to nudge him out, in my opinion. Not send him down to the middle tier, but I could see this continued meteoric rise of Danny Briones, ironically enough, after she's voted out.
Yeah, I can definitely see her move above Memphis, like purely because of the content we're going to get from the jury, because she's going to be just angrier and angrier.
I also think that the way that Memphis leaves this week, assuming he leaves, could have an impact. If he spends the entire week completely oblivious, like laughing at Christmas for going, like really looks like a doofus, that may impact, because that's the last thing we're gonna remember from Memphis, and we might remember him as like an Austin figure of like you really got embarrassed on the way out the door. So you know. That could have an impact. Just barely above Memphis is Ian, still there. Who the gap has come closer. That they are very, very, very neck and neck here, competing renegades. Who can stay on top?
Interesting. I thought that Ian, of all people, would have gotten the biggest boost because he really seems to have like absolutely no hard feelings. He's doubling down on the attitude he had as soon as he found out about the committee, which is like, hey, it's cool. It's just a game. I'm going to go play backgammon. So I thought that would have earned some favorability in the fans' eyes, but I guess not.
You are actually right. He did go up from last week. It's just that Memphis also rose from last week. So they both went up over the week. Memphis, I imagine, for game reasons. Ian for potentially jury reasons. And again, I have to imagine, if we're looking at the likes of Devon going down, Ian going up, perhaps, the audience took sides in that disagreement, and perhaps that was part of it. So Ian and Danny, so far the only evicted players to evade the drop that everyone else faced this week. So
right. Let's go. Oh, I'm excited. I'm intrigued for this one. I'm very intrigued for this one.
Above Ian is Enzo.
Oh,
yeah.
I don't know why I was expecting you to say Tyler. I just expect him to have a much bigger drop. But
I don't know. He might be coming up because I think this was actually a pretty good week for Nicole Franzel. So I think it depends on how many of those Franzel stands are coming out. I think the Enzo drop, it sort of makes sense. Like I think this is another week where maybe people were a bit ticked off at him. He rats out, Tyler outing the committee to Cody. Like this was another thing where it was clearly at least Enzo expressing like, well, Cody needs to hear about this. I'm going to go tell dad. And so I think that's continues just, I think the opinion of Enzo really, he's all bark and no bite. He just keeps reporting back to Cody. And, if he gets rid of Memphis here, I do feel like his position might fall even farther because I think that he's starting to slip up a bit here in the end game when he has some clear paths in front of him. He's letting his closest relationships betray his better judgment from a certain perspective. So I can understand the slip here.
Yeah, it seems like he's purely playing for Cody's game and he's not stepping back and like looking at himself. I mean, I think it was last night or the night before that he was talking about, man, I'm screwed. Like looking at the chess pieces, seeing, his route to the end, but in his actions, he's playing for Cody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I also think something that I think I might be noticing as well is that we do these on Saturday, and we try to like look at the past week as like how did that impact things. But I think that part of what I'm seeing is that I think it might take a week sometimes for the changes to sink in.
There's some latency. Yeah,
I could really see a lot of like the triple eviction events impacting this a lot, like Kevin, David moving down, even Devon to a degree, just like as having been recently evicted. Danny going up doesn't make a ton of sense in that regard, but we did just get the jury segment. And Enzo did take a big hit last week as well, and it was a much smaller hit this week, but he is continuing to move down. Just 2 weeks ago, Enzo had cracked the top tier, and now he is a below average score in the upper tier. So he is quite the fall from grace here for Enzo.
Yeah, and I think that tracks with what you were talking about last week. I think the audience's invested hope in him of, okay, it really does seem like he is going to do something. That's what he's telling us. And upon us sort of realizing the entire time that like this is a guy who will be loyal almost to a fault. Even though he claims that he will not be loyal sometimes, it sort of was a realization that washed upon all of us, and he is sort of paying the consequences for that epiphany.
Mm-hmm. All right. So above Enzo is Nicole Franzel.
Oh.
Yes. Actually, no real movement for Nicole. She basically stays the same. It's just that Enzo fell below her.
Maybe we'll see what you're seeing, Taryn, and
Exactly.
maybe next week she'll go up.
I would not be surprised, especially if Nicole wins like the Final Four veto or something. I could see, because there's
if she wins the Final Four veto and takes out Christmas instead of Enzo because Cody told her to, I'm not sure that's going to go well for her.
That's true. No, at that point, the eviction wouldn't have happened yet. So maybe there'll still be hope within people that she'll do that. Yeah. So I know that you had this discussion last week, and I think we've sort of parsed out earlier in this podcast that there's a very little chance that Nicole will become the first 2-time winner, at least currently. I think what separates her from me from a lot of like, I'm going to make the Survivor comparisons, but like some of those big Survivor players honestly might come down to an entertainment factor in a manner of speaking. Like I do feel like your Sandras, your Parvati's, your Boston Robs all have these moments where they make really fun TV, whether it's something they were a part of or something they did by themselves, that you really like look back on them and remember them well by. What do we have for Nicole Franzel when she was like, got them to convince to get rid of Big Meech and Natalie in Big Brother 18? Like that's
pretty good
visual entertainment, entertaining display of them. It's tougher to have that sort of Yas Queen moment though, which is why I think when we come back to like the Nicole versus Janelle stuff, Janelle has "Give Me That Key, Bitch" and "Bye Bye Bitches." Like she has these really fun moments that, while not outwardly as iconic from a strategic perspective, are just iconic from an entertainment perspective. And so I think you kind of need to have both in a certain array to be viewed as like a legend. And I don't know if Nicole has that, just maybe due to her personality, to be honest.
Yeah, and that's what happens with this is the legacy watch. It's about your legacy. It's not just about gameplay. Just because she's a winner doesn't mean that she is going to have a higher legacy. And legacy often encompasses like, what are you giving me? I am judging you on my own personal subjective decision, and you are giving me nothing. In fact, you are intentionally denying things from me. So I'm going to intentionally deny your legacy on the Legacy Watch.
Well, and I also wonder, I know you said there's some latency here, but if there is some knee-jerk reactions, she has had some to Aisha's points, very weird conversations to herself about how good of a player she is and how people have doubted her for so many years, that in one perspective could be viewed as motivational, especially for someone who has very open, self-esteem issues as someone like Nicole, but on the other hand, could sort of be feeding that flame that a lot of people are fanning right now of like, oh, you're delusional. Oh, you think you're better than you think you are. And so it might even out then there as well.
Mm-hmm. All right. Above Nicole Franzel is still Cody, still in the top tier.
Wow.
Yeah. No real movement for Cody either this week. He is
that's interesting.
Basically exactly the same.
You know what? When I think of Cody's legacy, I'm actually like, obviously we all know that he's playing the best game, and with all the pre-gaming things aside, whatever people want to believe, he's able to do this without Derek in the house directly influencing his game moves. So it's showing that, he did have a little bit of I guess he played a bigger role in the hitman than people like to give him credit for. And so this is proving to me that he's not just comps. He's able to think through things, think through situations. And so I would think that would help his legacy. I know we are in the top tier, so that is still pretty high. But when you think of it in comparison to Tyler and what this season has kind of done for people's perceptions of him, I would think he would be above Tyler by now.
I can't remember from the Tuesday podcast, Taryn, did the majority of the audience say that getting rid of Tyler was the thing that Cody should have done as HOH?
Let me check.
So maybe that has some impact on it. Is if they felt like he made the wrong decision by going after Christmas, that could have impacted it.
Yeah, so the majority of the audience felt that he should have taken out Christmas instead of Tyler.
So maybe that's the one thing of it, that like he did have yet another very strong week. He won both competitions. He got rid of a very big threat, even if his win equity was waning with everything. But if the audience disagreed with the decisions that were largely his this week, that might not have helped him.
I mean, it's been a very slow climb for Cody all season. He started the season about where Enzo is right now, and after a season of dominating the game, he has only barely cracked the top tier. So I think that for Cody, he's really gonna have to pull out the win if he's gonna really see the fruits of his labor this season. I think, because if he doesn't, I think they'll drop him right back into the upper tier.
I'm very intrigued to see if he does win, how people even outside of this will just look upon his game, because I feel like we have rarely seen a situation where the first game they played, they made one of the biggest mistakes in the show's history and then go on to play like a really good game. How do you compartmentalize that in a person? You know, like, how do you look upon him? Does Cody enter the top tier of Big Brother players of all time, not even in this cast, despite the fact that he made such a big error the first time? Is it more, what have you done for me lately?
Yeah, because then when you're looking at him in comparison, you'll have to say, would those other people ever make that big mistake? And the answer is probably no. So then that automatically puts him below a certain tier of people.
Yeah. Well, that's where Cody stands for now, although he's still in the game and has a chance to continue to rise. Above Cody on the Legacy Watch is Kaser.
What is happening?
This is topsy-turvy land. We're living in the upside down, people. How? What?
So let me explain this. I can tell you, Tyler did not rise. This is actually Kaser falling by a significant margin. By about half of a tier, Kaser has fallen to just above Cody, below Tyler. And so I was looking at this, and as you guys were talking, I was looking at these numbers to see, like, did the Tyler stands come in here and try to screw with my numbers here? I mean, I guess I'd need like Christina to look at this. It doesn't actually look that out of place. Like, he doesn't have like a crazy amount of bottom tier votes. It's mostly that he got a lot more like good tier and top tier votes than he usually does. So it doesn't seem to be like dramatic brigading, but again, I'm not like an analyst here. But yeah, it's a fall. It's a fall for Kaser. Definitely curious to see if this is something that lasts until next week, or if it's just a temporary thing because of reasons.
I mean,
it can't last. Like, even all of his exit interviews, and I haven't finished like reading and listening to all of them, but he's not taking ownership for even the moves he made this season. So it's like, how, I don't know. I think that would help if we were able to see some justification for some of the stuff that he did do. That would help his legacy, but to go up above Kaser?
Yeah, I don't know. Well, the fall in Kaser is interesting. It could be what you attributed to Bailey before, of like just sort of out of sight, out of mind, that people are just like, yeah, I mean, Kaser was so long ago. We don't need to really like swarm him anymore. But I do think when you do this at the end of the season, when he comes back and does like that pre-jury check-in with Julie Chen Moonves, it's gonna be like, oh, now we remember why we love Kaser so much. Like, yes, let's groundswell support for him again. I hope it's just, well, he hasn't really been on the show in a while, so he's not really top of mind, so he's not really top tier. Though I recommend people go check out his YouTube channel, because he's doing some really cool stuff outside of the Big Brother house that is top tier content.
Yeah. I like I said, I think my guess is that there's going to be a bounce back next week. I think that that there was probably They're probably, like I said, there's a little, it was actually a little bit of a boost in numbers in the responses this week. And it wasn't a big boost in numbers, but perhaps just that little bit of a boost with people who have different perspectives than the people who normally take the survey. Perhaps that was enough to make a bit of a difference here in some of these numbers. So I'm definitely going to be curious to see if this sticks. And then if it does, then we'll really have to, I guess, examine like what happened here.
Right.
But for now, I don't think Kaser has done anything to warrant a big drop. In fact, the as you said, Mike, the YouTube video that has been going around it was great of Kaser. So we'll see. Above Kaser is Tyler here in the top tier. As I said, no movement on Tyler. He actually stayed
so interesting.
the same.
Wow.
If I'm looking at this,
Aisha and I were both saying like, okay, we know Tyler's going to take a hit. How big of a hit is he going to take? It's apparently no hits, 0 hits this week. This week at least. We'll see what happens if he gets a bad jury house segment. Like if this latency that you're theorizing comes about, it might be bigger of a hit. Because I mean, if you're talking about, you know, the way that somebody goes out affecting their possible rating, I don't think that Tyler had a great week as his final week on BB22.
Right. And I see a lot of people in the chat saying like, it's his legacy, not just gameplay. I know. But even just overall thinking, and when I think about Big Brother in a couple years, am I going to think about Tyler as this top tier player? And no, like if like thinking on in all aspects. And so I think that it's odd to maintain, especially with what we've been seeing and how he feels about the game and how invested he is, especially in this season. And, you know, I think maybe we'll see a change in a week, but.
Yeah, I think also something that might happen is that if they're, and I know that Tyler is a very popular player, that on his way out, you're feeling extra like emotional about like, no, I just lost him. Like, no, he's still a legend. Like one of the top upvoted posts on Reddit the last few days has been like, you know, Tyler is still a legend, guys. Like it's still, he's top, he's amazing. And so I think it can sometimes provoke that reaction that like, you know, over the course of the season, you're like, I'm kind of disappointed with his gameplay, but then he's gone. And it's like, oh, well, if I'm looking at everything in context now that he's gone, like I'm remembering back to season 20 now that I'm out of the moment, that you might look back to it and feel like, okay, well, he's still great. And that's kind of where I am on Tyler. Like this season was a disappointment. I liked some of what he was doing at the start of the game, but I think overall he did not come with the same level of engagement or even skill that he had in Big Brother 20. I think that he took the wrong lessons from his loss, and I think he really screwed up in a lot of different ways this season. Do I think that takes away from his Big Brother 20 gameplay? I don't think so. I think that we saw some flaws in that game, especially at the Final Four, that really manifested themselves this season in a much bigger way. And we can probably extrapolate like, okay, in slightly different circumstances, maybe those flaws would have been more pronounced in that original season. But overall, what he did in season 20 was still pretty incredible. And I would still say he's one of the best players of the last, I don't know, like 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
And so, you know, with that in mind, I would still have Tyler in the top tier, I think, for myself. But I right now, legacy-wise, I mean, obviously, everybody knows Kaser's in the pantheon for me. But I would probably have Cody above Tyler right now. Right now, I think if Cody doesn't win, then maybe there's another conversation to be had. But that's kind of where I'm feeling at the moment.
Yeah, that's my idea as well. It's like, I think top tier, like you said, I think even just incorporating popularity, like you said, despite him really not being there mentally this season. I think another big thing was, I think there were a lot of things that he wanted to do this season in the beginning that didn't work out. Like, I think he was excited about working with Casey. She wasn't there. I think he was like, the fan in him was excited to work with Kaser and Janelle. And then he hears about them wanting to get rid of him, and that disappoints him. I think that's when he sort of said like, well, if I'm sort of forced to be here and I'm not doing the things that I want to do, then maybe I do want to leave. And that leads to all the calamity from week 5. So I think all that working against him, I still think that, what he was able to do in Big Brother 20 should still be weighed in there. I'm just still surprised that he didn't fall whatsoever. Like, I'm just very surprised that he did not take a hit from this past week. And just looking back on his Big Brother 22 recency bias, including like, yes, week 5 was so long ago, but even in talking with Julie Chen and talking with us as well, he just seems like totally fine with things because he was just in such a bad place this entire season.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Again, I'm curious to see if we see the sort of delayed impact of this, a week away from Tyler being in the game. What are we going to see in the Legacy Watch? So I'll be very curious to see where we land next week. But in the meantime, this is where we are with Tyler here. Also, I also feel like I think Tyler will receive favorable content in the jury. I think that he's going to be a very non-bitter juror. I think that tends to be a good look. So I think, he's got positive content probably on the way, but he's also still, I think, got a little bit of, the bounce back that's going to happen as well. So definitely curious to look out for where Tyler ends up over the rest of the season. Above Tyler is, of course, Janelle, who fell out of the Pantheon.
Wow,
No.
bad week. Bad. This is the bad place.
People?
This is the bad place.
No.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. I can't accept that.
Now she has always been on the very low end of the Pantheon. It has always been a low score within that Pantheon. She did not fall as far as she did fall. She fell further than a lot of people. Her and Kaser fell the most, which does again lead me to believe that there was perhaps some targeted voting, but
right.
But here it is. She has fallen out of the top tier, out of the Pantheon into the top tier, and that's where she stands right now. Over the and I will say, I've been expecting, she's been slowly dropping over the course of the season. I've been expecting something like this, not so sudden, but perhaps a little bit over the course of the season. I think this is a lot more dramatic than I would have expected, though.
Did she post anything on social media that warranted any sort of drop? I can't, is she, I'm assuming all of her content is anti-Nicole, which I think is usually what the audience is happy about.
She tweets regularly about, anti-Nicole material, but people eat it up. They love it.
I have seen some pushback on that. Why is she still posting? Why does Nicole still
I've seen a bit of the Regina George, why are you so obsessed with me?
Yeah. Especially very recently where Nicole is winning comps all of a sudden and it's looking like she might be the only opposition to Cody that exists. I feel like there is a little bit of a swell in the Nicole direction. And so the hating on Nicole might not be as popular. But again, I don't know if that fully explains any of this.
Right.
It's interesting. Wait, so did all the people who saw either no change to their score or a bump in their score, were those all the committee members and then just all the non-committee members dropped?
So if I look at this here, the people that did not drop, or the people that went up, were Memphis, Ian, and Danny.
Not a good week.
That was it. Memphis, Ian, and Danny went up by a small amount. Everybody else either went down or stayed the same. The people that stayed the same were Tyler, Cody, Nicole, and that. Oh, sorry, Christmas. Did Christmas go up? Christmas went up as well. Christmas, Ian, Memphis, and Danny went up.
So odd.
Tyler, Cody, Nicole stayed the same.
Yeah. So it was basically
everyone else fell.
Yeah. So the committee plus Ian either had their score maintain or go up, and everybody else went down.
Yeah. But you would think Enzo would be lumped into the committee, but he went down as well.
Yeah. And apparently the committee is it's the committee plus Ian, not the committee plus Enzo.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Ian was that seventh wheel that nobody knew about the entire time.
So weird.
Wow.
Yeah. So the biggest boost was, I believe, Danny. So maybe it was those Danny stands that came for me on Twitter.
Yeah.
Maybe
the Danny stands. They know they know who they like. Now we see who apparently they don't like. Which I guess.
I think Danny fans would explain a Janelle drop a lot better. Than the
That's
Tyler
actually very
fans.
true. Though it would, but I don't know. Danny was friends with Davon, and Davon got a drop, so that would.
true.
But though maybe it was also like, well, I saw how close they were, and like Danny needs to leapfrog Davon. Wow, this is
strategy.
This has to be. I know you've only been doing this for a short while, Taryn. This has to be the most drastic. I think things have shifted around this season.
It is pretty. So like, and I will say this too. It was like I did feel like we were on a little bit of a bubble last week because everyone was getting pushed up to the top. And I feel like this week it was like, no, shove them down.
Yeah.
And they know.
But yeah, like I said, like I don't see anything like crazy out of the ordinary with these numbers. Honestly, Cody is the person who seems to have been brigaded the most. That he has the highest proportion of like bottom tier rankings to like low tier to like the rest of them. Or I guess Nicole is pretty high too. But like usually you expect like they go up in increments. Like the amount of bottom tier, low tier, middle tier, they go up in the amount. But Cody has more bottom tier than low tier, which is a sign to me that people are really trying to knock him down.
Exactly, very very targeted rankings it seems.
Oh, and Tyler.
Yeah.
Tyler also has more bottom tier than low tier. I don't know, guys. I don't know. I need Christina to look at this for me.
we need some like Christina, the Nate Silver of Terran's behind the scenes. It's like do some proper data. What's the R squared on all of this correlation?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we need a comment section so they have to justify their votes.
Yeah, the three people with more bottom tier than low tier votes are Tyler, Cody, and David. Everybody else does not have that.
What?
So weird.
Well, that was an attack on the All Guys Alliance that never was.
Oh yeah, the Team Freeze or whatever it was called.
Team Freeze. All right. So, like I said, we'll see. We'll see where this goes. I'm very interested in seeing next week. Very interested to see if Christina has any information for us. But that is the Legacy Watch for the week. I will say we could, I could be wrong. Maybe this is just the natural direction of where things are going to go. I've expected things to change a little more dramatically toward the end of the season. Not necessarily in this direction, but who knows? Who knows? I don't want people to be like, Taryn, you are so biased. You don't think that people can actually feel this way. You're going to say it must have been cheating. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying there is a possibility that it went that way. I just don't think it's particularly likely. It's just an anomaly from from all the other stuff I've seen. If it continues on, then I will say 100% valid stuff.
Right. There could be a chance that they're like congregating towards some sort of mean, the Keisha level, if you will. Yeah. But weird coming down for literally everyone across the board, with apparently the exception of the committee and Ian Terry.
Right. They can't keep it up for the rest of the month. That's too much commitment.
Too much commitment for the committee.
Right.
All right. So that's what we have. That is the Legacy Watch. Very curious to see what happens next week, but there we are. That is the roundtable for tonight. Asia, any final thoughts?
Yeah, so I know that I said that like it's in Cody and mainly Enzo's best interest for Memphis to go or not to go for Christmas to go this week. I would love to see Memphis go personally, but thinking about their games, that's why it would be good for Memphis to stay. I personally want Memphis to go. but yeah, that's it. I'm glad that at least things are shaking up a little bit. And I think that only happened because Nicole won. We had that potential with Christmas winning with Cody possibly leaving, but I'm glad that, you know, it's not so predictable, at least this week. So that's something.
Yeah. Mike, any final thoughts?
So this is sort of tangential to Big Brother, but so the day we're recording this, today's World Mental Health Awareness Day. And, you know, I actually just think it comes a bit part and parcel with the message that we were sort of carting off in the beginning of the episode here. It is a tough time to be a person in the world right now. The extremities of being in a pandemic, the continuing political, societal, racial strife. Try not to add stress, anxiety, and depression over a reality show to it. And I know it is easier said than done, but I find it interesting that we come off of, you know, these legacy watch rankings, which were on for the most part negative, and I do not attribute that to any sort of factor. But I know this can be a difficult time for people in general, whether it be the time of the year, the circumstances, what have you. So I will again say, if you want to take time away from the show, from the podcasts, and you know, just take some time for yourself, please do, because these house guests will move out at the end of the season, but you are living rent-free in your own head for the rest of your life. And so make sure you take care of yourself. Make sure you take care of others who you know might be in a difficult situation, given everything. Just look out for each other, people. Be kind, in a manner of speaking. And I am very happy that I get to come on here and sort of do my own form of escape, in a manner of speaking, as someone who also suffers from anxiety and depression, to get to come on and talk about this, to have a lot of fun, to have the image of a naked Kevin in cheetah print on the back of a large lion stuck in my head for the rest of my life now. It's been a fantastic time. And Aisha's been killing it. Taryn, positive vibes all around. This has been a very fun night. And I'm wishing everyone the best as we get into the final few weeks here.
Thank you, Mike. I love that message, and I completely concur. And it has been such a blessing for me to be able to. I know it's been a season, but you know, before this season there was no season, and that was harder for me. It has been such a pleasure to be able to have Big Brother and talk about Big Brother with all of you guys throughout the season. It has been so helpful to me. I hope it has been helpful to you in some small way as well. And I echo everything else that Mike said. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. I know we've still got like 3 weeks to go, but
I know I'm like, well, let's wrap it up here. I know we only have about a month to go.
So that's what we got. Thank you guys so much for joining us. You can find me on Twitch when Big Brother ends. You can still find me there hanging out, continuing to enjoy ourselves. So you can find me at twitch.tv/Taryn Armstrong. You can also find me on Twitter at Armstrong Taryn. That's where you can find the survey for the Legacy Watch. If you disagreed with tonight's results, make sure you go and vote.
Yeah, listen,
make sure
the only one who can change the results is you know?
Right? That speaks for the country as well.
Yes, this is a great example of why you need to go and vote.
Amazing. I love this. I love no voter suppression going on. You're suppressing yourself and not voting.
Yes. Asia, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Asia Like Asia. So that's AYSHA like ASIA. And if you are watching the video version and you've seen these little dogs running around, you can also catch some prime puppy content on my Instagram at it's Asia Like the Continent. So AYSHA like the continent on Instagram.
There you go. Mike, what are you up to?
A butt ton of stuff. You can, of course, follow me at a Mike Bloom type. As I mentioned before, I have been doing weekly exit press for Parade.com. Got to talk with Tyler, where he gave some very interesting answers about why he outed the committee, his flipping back and forth about wanting to quit back in week 5. So I heavily recommend people check that out, and I'll be continuing with those throughout the season. But CBS Reality will continue with coverage from my perspective as The Amazing Race comes back next week. I know Asia in particular, super excited for that. So it's going to be myself, Jessica Leese, and Rob Cesternino. We are doing twice a week coverage. We're doing the regular recaps on Wednesday. And then a la the slop, we're going to do sort of like an odds and ends miscellaneous feedback guest show over the weekend as well.
Can you tell me what is with the new marketing for The Amazing Race?
You mean the, hey, aren't you missing going outside? Don't you want to go on a vacation? We'll watch these people do so.
Yeah, like, go on an adventure with your friends. Don't you want to do it? It's a lovely experience. Like, like, I'm used to, like, go to The Amazing Race. It's a blast.
No, yeah, they're doing some sort of like ASMR, TAR stuff where they're really trying to take the soft approach. I don't know. It's weird between that and like the Masked Singer being like, well, we're using a virtual audience, even though you cannot tell from the piped in audience shots that we've used. We're like, the shows are still trying to figure out whether they should acknowledge the fact that the world is different or whether they want to keep going same old, same old. So apparently Amazing Race is doing the same footage, but now they're bringing in like sultry, sexy voice man to be like, don't worry, everything's okay. You get to watch people run around the world that they did 2 years ago. But I'm very happy. We did a preview with Dan Heaton of these 11 teams. I'm very excited about the cast. Over on the scripted side of things, if you're interested in doing some scripted TV coverage on the new side, I'm covering Star Trek Discovery with Jessica Leese, which is coming out next week on CBS All Access. And on the old side, Josh Wigler and I have been doing an episodic Lost Rewatch podcast called Down the Hatch for the past year plus. We had a very, very fun week. I heavily recommend people check that out if you're a Lost fan. And Post Show Recaps just launched a Patreon as well. So there is even more talk going on between a Discord, between 3+ different patron-only podcasts going on. We would appreciate your support if you have the funds and the means to do so. We would absolutely love your support. Patreon.com/post-show recaps if you want to do that. Otherwise, at a Mike Bloom type for all of the various shenanigans I'm up to on the internet.
All right. Looking forward to it all. You can, of course, find me back on the podcast tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. Eastern to update you on everything that happens today on the Big Brother 22 live feeds. And tomorrow night is not an episode, but Monday night is an episode.
If you want to watch Old School or Ferris Bueller or whatever, feel free to watch it tomorrow on CBS.
Yeah. After the Monday night episode, we will have a recap for you for the veto episode where we'll see Nicole win the comics. And this has to be like the longest I've ever promoted a podcast, but I'm telling you, it's got to be tomorrow that the emotional intelligence I keep thinking it's coming. I do not know, but Rob said yesterday this weekend, so I'm pretty sure it's got to be tomorrow. And we recorded an emotional intelligence podcast. That was very fun. We talked about how it impacts Big Brother, how it can impact Big Brother. And
did y'all only do one personality type test?
The person that came on to talk to us is like an emotional intelligence coach expert person who has a test that they give, and Rob and I took the test, and then we talked about like the different aspects. I think there were
actually more breaking news, Taryn. I believe it was just posted on the website, so
there
people
you
can
go.
Check it out right now. Also, I will give a PSA here that apparently the movie showing tomorrow night is the story of David Alexander, Clueless, is showing tomorrow night on CBS if you want to check that out.
All right. So watch a double feature. Watch Clueless, followed by the Emotional Intelligence podcast.
Yeah, the really nice, because compliments.
It really was inspired by David on the feeds talking about how he read the Emotional Intelligence book. So that's what we have for you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and we'll see you next time.